Good morning. Our reading this morning is Hebrews chapter 11, 17 to 19. Hebrews 17 to 19. By faith, Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. He who had received the promises was about to sacrifice his one and only son, even though God had said to him, "It is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned." Abraham reasoned that God could raise the dead, and figuratively speaking, he did receive Isaac back from the dead. Cody?
Genesis 22:11 starts with, "But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, 'Abraham, Abraham.' And he said, 'Here I am.'" Something pretty crazy starts there. But Abraham, up to this point, had experienced what we might say was already more than his fair share of testing, since God had called him. With mixed successes, really. First God, this God who's unknown to him really, calls him out and tells him to leave his homeland, to leave his father's house. He does pretty good. He listens and he goes. That takes a lot of faith. I'm not sure that we always think about that. That if God called you to get up and go and leave your family and go to another land, that takes a lot of faith. Mm-hmm. But especially in Abraham's case, this is a God that at this point, he doesn't know God. But then God reaches out to him, and he goes. Later, we see him traveling to Egypt with his wife Sarai at the time, where he has her pretend to be his sister for a time out of fear in Genesis 12. Well, I don't think he did so well on that test. We see his nephew Lot captured, and he has to go and rescue him. That's pretty trying. Later again, he pretends Sarah is his wife when dealing with King Abimelech and the Philistines. Not good. I don't know about you, but when I'm reading some of these stories, I start to wonder, God, did you make the right choice with him? Yeah, he trusted you enough to follow you when you asked him to leave his homeland, but he's given his wife to another man because he's afraid that you're not going to protect him. God, what's going on here? And one of the greatest tests up to this point for Abraham really seems to be waiting on God, also with relatively mixed success. I don't know about you, but waiting is often also the hardest test in my life. Not a patient person. But you see, when God called Abraham, named Abram at the time, he was about 75 years old. And God made Abram some promises. He promises to bless Abram, to make his name great, to make him into a great nation, and to make him a blessing to those other nations. And then in Genesis 12, later, God promises the land of the Canaanites to Abram's offspring. Well, Abram has no offspring yet. He's getting pretty old. And then God goes and tells him that he will actually give him his very own son, and that his offspring will actually be as many as the stars in the sky or as the grains of sand. 10 years later, Abram and Sarai seem to be tired of waiting, and they decide to help God out. You know? Maybe God didn't mean that Sarah would give birth. And so they decide to use a servant to give Abraham his offspring, helping God out, you know? So Abram has a child with his wife's servant Hagar. In the long run, this actually causes more heartache and pain for everybody involved. Because this wasn't actually God's plan. They needed to keep waiting. So later, when Abram is 100 years old, his wife Sarah finally gives birth to Isaac. That's 25 years of waiting for God to fulfill one of his promises. This child of promise is born, and everything is great. The test is over, he thinks. Everything's great for a while. But after 25 years of waiting to have a son, Abraham is probably going to face his greatest test yet. One of the paradoxes of life is that tests seem to be for our own good. We don't like them. We dread them. We often wish they would go away. I don't know anybody personally who likes times of testing. I'm not talking about tests in school. I know some crazy people like those. And yet God sets up tests for a reason. Think about the caterpillar becoming a butterfly. Many of us would feel pity seeing this little cocoon with a caterpillar in it shaking and jostling as the insect tries to fight its way out. And a lot of people would feel moved and wish to help out by opening the cocoon a little to help the butterfly get out. But if we did that, we would find that the butterfly inside would actually be unable to fly because it didn't gain the strength that comes from the struggle of getting out of that cocoon on its own, of that test. And so we get to Genesis 22, and that brings us and Abraham to the mountaintop of testing of faith. Now, I have a short video clip. It's a trailer for a movie about Abraham and Isaac. And this takes some artistic license, right? The point is, I want to try and make this real for you, to engage some emotion for a second before we really dive into it.
Abraham, Lord, take now your son and go to the land of Moriah, and there offer him.
The Lord came to me last night. I must go to Moriah and make a sacrifice to him there. Isaac and I will go alone.
Why, Isaac?
Because the Lord commands it.
Make sure no harm comes to our son. The road is a dangerous place, Abraham.
The Lord has set us on this path. He will guide us.
This road belongs to Abimelech, king of Pelisath.
I know who owns this road. I have given your king plenty of tributes.
What is your name, old man?
Abraham.
Why go all this way? Go through all this effort?
He has us do this in remembrance that death is the penalty for sin.
You believe that?
It's impossible.
Is anything too difficult for the Lord? What's your purpose in this? If this is your judgment on me, take my life, not his. Everyone's blind until their eyes are opened.
The Lord chose that man out from the wicked, that hope may endure.
Take me!
I showed that because I don't know about you, but when I sometimes I gloss over this story. I'm so used to it. And when I saw that trailer, it made me cry because it made it real for me. That, Abraham was a real man, and he experienced real emotions. And this is a big thing that is happening to him. Genesis 22, 1 through 3 says, "After these things, God tested Abraham and said to him, 'Abraham.' And he said, 'Here I am.' He said, 'Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I will tell you.' After waiting 25 years for a son, God asks Abraham to offer Isaac as a sacrifice. Can you even imagine what Abraham must have been experiencing in that moment? This is his baby boy. He held him after he was born. He saw his first smile. He watched him learn to crawl and take his first steps. He's hugged him. He's kissed him. He's held him when he was scared or hurt. Heard his first words. Watched him grow up into a young man. And now God is asking Abraham to kill him. And God knows how much Abraham loves Isaac. He says, "Take your son, your only son, whom you love." What's interesting here is Isaac is not actually Abraham's only son. If you remember, he had Ishmael by Hagar. The Hebrew text here, the wording actually is referring to value, not number. To Abraham, this is his son, his valuable son, his special son. He is a miracle child, a gift from God, and through him, God is going to fulfill his promises. And Abraham loves him. I think we gloss over that sometimes. Maybe we don't take the time to think about it when we're reading it, or maybe, I don't know about you, but sometimes I just kind of pictured Abraham as a hardened man who really had no problem doing this. But that's not what Genesis says. It says that Isaac was Abraham's special son, his special boy, and Abraham loved him. I mean, what an unimaginable ask. And it's even worse than that. Moriah is not very close. Wherever its exact location is, because there's some debate on that, it took 3 days to get there. That is 3 days of walking with your son whom you love to the place where you have to sacrifice and kill him. Probably dreading the moment the entire way when he asks you, "What are we going to sacrifice? Where's the lamb?" I have a question for you. Could you do it? Could you say yes to this? I don't think I could. Why would God ask Abraham to do something like this? Now, there are so many reasons, right, that it could be. But God has promised to make Abraham a great nation using Isaac, this miracle child. Now, in Abraham's shoes, I think it would be possible for my faith to shift. Now that he has Isaac, maybe Abraham is starting to count on Isaac to fulfill the promises a little more than God. Maybe his focus has shifted just a little bit. Maybe God is asking Abraham, where does your faith lie right now? And Abraham's response is amazing. Genesis 22:3 says, "So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him, and his son Isaac. And he cut the wood for the burnt offering, and arose and went to the place of which God had told him." Abraham does it. He gets up and he goes. And whatever questions or doubts or fears he has, we don't see him expressing them. He just goes. Have you ever thought about this? Did Abraham tell Sarah what he was going to do? The Bible doesn't tell us. But do you think Sarah wondered where they were going without the lamb? What are they going to do? I can't imagine any mother alive being okay with what Abraham is about to do. So I don't know. After 3 days of walking, they finally arrive at Moriah. Genesis 22:5 then says, "Then Abraham said to his young men, 'Stay here with the donkey. I and the boy will go over there and worship and come again to you.'" And there's something really, really interesting here that a lot of us might have missed. It's the way Abraham words things. Abraham tells his servants that not only would he and Isaac go to worship, but that both of them would return. So this means one of 2 things. Either Abraham is deceiving them, he is misleading Isaac and his men and concealing the fact that he is going to sacrifice Isaac and come back alone, or Abraham believes that whatever's going to happen, he's going to return with Isaac. He is ready and willing to sacrifice Isaac, and for all he knows, he's going to have to do it. But he also expects God to do something. The New Testament book of Hebrews seems to take this as a statement of Abraham's faith. Faith that God would raise Isaac from the dead. Hebrews 11:17-19 says, "By faith Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac. And he who had received the promises was in the act of offering up his only son, of whom it was said, 'Through Isaac shall your offspring be named.' He considered that God was able even to raise him from the dead, from which, figuratively speaking, he did receive him back." I mean, that is amazing faith. But again, let's not downplay it or gloss over it. Abraham, as far as he knows, still has to go through the act of killing his son with a knife, of binding him up and subjecting him to all those emotions, the anxiety, fear, and even if temporary, death. But he's ready to do this because he has faith. Now, this isn't some kind of weak faith that many people talk about today. It's a light, easy choice to believe that God can do something, but not really having to put our money where our mouth is. Yeah, I believe God can do that, but I'm never going to have to experience it. It's easy to say. Abraham, this is a deep, emotional, desperate faith. Abraham loves his son, and he is desperately clinging to God's promises, hoping against hope, begging, believing it to be true. He is holding on to God's promises so tightly, choosing to believe that this God who called him wouldn't do this if he didn't have a plan. This is real, raw faith. And even when Isaac asks Abraham the question that he must have been dreading, where's the lamb? He clings to God's promises. He says, God will provide. And so they go up the mountain. Genesis 22, 9 through 10 says, when they came to the place of which God had told him, Abraham built the altar there and laid the wood in order and bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to slaughter his son. There's another interesting detail here. It doesn't look like Isaac resisted. I mean, verse 5 says that Abraham loaded Isaac up with the wood and Isaac carried it. And it's not a small amount of wood to build an altar. If Isaac was big enough and strong enough to carry all that wood, likely at least a teenager, he could have been able to resist. And there is a good chance that this young, strong man could have overpowered a 100-plus-year-old man if he wanted to. But there's neither record of a struggle or even a word of exchange. It seems that Isaac chooses to trust his father and ultimately God. And so it says Abraham takes the knife to slaughter his son. That is a strong, evocative word. It brings to mind imageries of slaughtering and butchering an animal. And it seems to be used here to heighten the sense of horror about what Abraham's about to do. This is intense. But then Genesis 22, 11 through 13. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, here I am. He said, do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, seeing you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him was a ram, caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of Isaac. It's all a test. Don't go through with it. Now I know where your faith lies. Now I know you fear the Lord. I have a question, though, that rattles around in my head when I read that. Didn't God already know? Isn't God all-knowing? Didn't he always know what Abraham would do? So why test him if God already knows the outcome? I heard Don give the answer just now. For Abraham's benefit. Yes, I do. Now Abraham himself knows without a doubt where his faith lies. Even though Isaac is his heir, Isaac's not going to be the one to fulfill the promise. God is. And this testing proves that Abraham's faith is real. Not to God, but to Abraham. Abraham now knows for a fact that there is nothing he would withhold from God. And it has to have. It is impossible that it didn't bring him closer to God. Because he also now knows that God is good and God will always provide and he always keeps his promises. And we learn later, testing refines us. Psalm 66:10 likens our testing to being refined like precious silver. And 1 Peter 1, 6 through 7 says that it tests the genuineness of our faith, which is precious like gold that has been tested by fire. Comes out better and stronger, refined, purer. So in our lives today, when you are being tested, because you will be tested, no matter how painful, take a lesson from Abraham and Isaac. It's for your own good. You will gain something out of it. Your faith will be refined and made purer. And when you come through the other side, you yourself will know your faith is the real deal. I really believe this. And your relationship with God will be stronger. In the middle of the testing, and I know it can be so hard, follow Abraham's example and cling to God's promises. No matter how long or difficult, remember that God promises to always be with us. And according to Romans 8:28, He will work it all out for your good eventually. And He will provide. And just keep reminding yourself, God is good. This is hard, but God is good. He keeps His promises and He will provide. I don't know about you, but this kind of seems like God is trying to prove something to us and to Abraham. That He picked the right person. He called the right person. You know, God has promised to make Abraham into a great nation that blesses the world. But it's more than that. You know, we're journeying through the story, God's story, from creation all the way to salvation in the end. And last week we talked about Adam and Eve and how they were made to be in relationship with God and to bear His image, to make Him visible in creation. And how they chose to rebel and the image was corrupted and the relationship was broken. And since then, God has been enacting a plan of restoration. A plan to restore humanity's relationship with Him and a plan to restore our image bearing. And Abraham is part of that plan. This plan starts with Abraham. Because the first step in God's plan here is to make a special people that are wholly His and wholly devoted to Him. And they're going to be Abraham's offspring. You know, we're still at the beginning of God's amazing story of salvation. But right off the bat, He is showing us and Abraham that He knows what He's doing. He has chosen correctly. He always chooses correctly. Yes, Abraham is flawed. We see that. He makes mistakes. But what really matters is his faith. He chooses to obey and trust God no matter what, holding back nothing. It's the same for us today. God has called each and every one of us, and He chooses correctly. God never makes mistakes. And it is our faith that matters, not our mistakes. God will test you, but it's for your own good. So cling to Him and to His promises, and your faith will grow. It will be refined and made stronger, and you will be closer to God. So when you're being tested, and when you're not being tested, trust God. He knows what he's doing.
Thanks, Cody.